Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the CW Kid Flash. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world, for 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya, was divided into two distinct categories, the extraordinary and the tragically, hopelessly ordinary. The extraordinary were the heroes who soared across the skyline, their vibrant costumes a stark contrast to the mundane gray of the city. They were all might, with a smile that could shatter despair. They were endeavor, a walking inferno of justice. They were every single person born with that magical, biological lottery ticket called a quirk. And then, there was him. The ordinary. Still scribbling in that creepy notebook, Deku? The voice, rough and crackling like popping embers, slammed into Izuku's concentration. He flinched, instinctively hunching over his desk, his arms curling around. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. The familiar scent of burnt sugar filled the air. Katsuki Bakugo loomed over him, flanked by his two usual sycophants. It's just a hobby, Kaken," Izuku stammered, his eyes glued to the half-finished sketch of the pro-hero Kamui Woods. Bakugo snatched the notebook with a speed that belied his lazy posture. "A hobby?" he sneered, flipping through the pages. Each one was a meticulously detailed breakdown of a hero's quirk, complete with speculative weaknesses and potential team-up strategies. "This is stalker-level obsession. You really think studying them is gonna make a difference? A quirkless loser like you can't be a hero. Get it through your thick skull." To punctuate the statement, Bakugo's palm began to glow. A series of miniature, sharp explosions erupted from the cover of the notebook, blasting the spine apart, and leaving a scorch mark in the shape of a handprint. He tossed the smoldering remains out the open classroom window. "Maybe if you spend less time dreaming, you'll find something a worthless Deku like you can actually do," Bakugo growled, before sauntering away with his cronies, their laughter echoing in the empty room. Izuku didn't move. He just stared at the spot on the floor where his notebook should have been. The familiar sting of tears pricked at his eyes, but he swallowed them down. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never did. This was his reality. A world of superpowers where he had none. A world where his oldest friend was his greatest tormentor. He was a spectator in a world of players, but even spectators could have their passions. Later that day, after retrieving his charred and waterlogged notebook from the koi pond, Izuku walked home. He kept his head down, tracing the cracks in the pavement, his mind a whirlwind of frustration and yearning. But as he turned a corner, a sight made him stop dead. It was a massive, gleaming white building that hadn't been there 2 years ago. A silver logo adorned its face, a stylized lightning bolt within a circle. SDR Labs Musudafu branch. A genuine, unforced smile bloomed on Izuku's face. This was his other obsession. While his classmates were focused on the heroes who used their powers, Izuku was equally fascinated by the science behind them. SDR Labs, a global leader in scientific research, had established this branch to study the very nature of quirks. Their lead scientist, the brilliant Dr. Haruki Ito, was a personal hero of Izuku's. Dr. Ito's theories on quirk singularity and metagene expression were revolutionary, and Izuku had devoured every paper he'd published. And tomorrow, his middle school was taking a field trip there. It was the one bright spot in his otherwise bleak existence. For one day, he could be close to the science of the extraordinary, even if he couldn't be a part of it. That night, sleep was a fleeting thing. Izuku's room was a shrine to heroism, every inch of wall space covered in All Might posters. The symbol of peace grinned down at him, his signature catchphrase. "I am here," emblazoned in bold letters. For Izuku, those words were a promise. A promise that someone would always be there to save the day. A promise he desperately wanted to make himself, but couldn't. He looked from the posters to the SDR Labs permission slip on his desk. Maybe, just maybe, science held an answer that genetics had denied him. It was a foolish, desperate hope, but it was all he had. The next day, the air inside SDR Labs was cool and smelled of ozone and clean electricity. The interior was even more impressive than the outside. Gleaming white corridors stretched into the distance, holographic displays flickered with complex data streams, and scientists in crisp lab coats moved with quiet, focused purpose. Izuku felt like he had stepped into the future. He clutched his new notebook, volume 14, so tightly his knuckles were white, already scribbling observations about the building's power grid. Their tour was led by a man in a wheelchair, whose sharp, intelligent eyes seemed to miss nothing. He had a warm, professorial smile and a charisma that instantly captivated the students. "Welcome, students of Aldera Junior High," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I am Dr. Haruki Ito, director of this facility. It is a pleasure to welcome the next generation of great minds. Here at SDR Labs, we believe that understanding is the first step toward progress. We seek to unravel the beautiful, complex mystery of quirks, not to weaponize them, but to better understand humanity itself." Izuku was starstruck. He hung on every word, his pen flying across the page. Dr. Ito guided them through various labs, showcasing advanced medical technology and energy research. Then, they arrived at the heart of the facility, the observation deck for the particle accelerator. It was a magnificent, terrifying sight. A massive, circular tunnel, miles in circumference, dominated the subterranean cavern below them. Thick, reinforced glass separated them from the humming behemoth. "This," Dr. Ito said, a note of profound pride in his voice, "is our crowning achievement. This accelerator will allow us to collide particles at speeds approaching light itself, unlocking the secrets of dark matter, dark energy, and perhaps, the very source from which quirks originate." A girl with pink dreadlocks and steampunk goggles pushed to the front, her eyes gleaming with manic energy. "You're creating a stable pocket dimension to observe exotic matter decay, right? What kind of magnetic containment are you using? Is it a standard tokamak design, or did you invent something new?" "Oh, I'm Mei Hatsum, by the way. These are some of my babies." She thrust a strange-looking metal glove into Dr. Ito's face. Dr. Ito chuckled, not at all fazed. "A pleasure, Ms. Hatsum. A very astute question. We are, in fact, using a proprietary containment field of my own design." Izuku's hand shot up. "Dr. Ito, sir! In your paper on subatomic quirk triggers, you theorized that a massive burst of exotic particles could potentially activate latent quirk factors in the population. Is this experiment designed, in part, to test that hypothesis?" The chattering class fell silent. All eyes turned to Izuku. Bakugo shot him a glare that could melt steel. Dr. Ito's smile widened, a genuine spark of interest in his eyes. "An excellent question, young man. You've done your reading." He wheeled himself closer to Izuku. "It is a theoretical possibility we are aware of. Unlocking human potential is, after all, our ultimate goal. What is your name?" "I Izuku Midoriya, sir." "Well, Mr. Midoriya, a mind like yours is exactly what science needs." For a fleeting moment, Izuku felt a warmth spread through his chest. It was a feeling he wasn't used to. Validation. That was when the first alarm blared. It started as a low, insistent hum, then escalated to a shrill, piercing shriek. Red lights began to flash, bathing the pristine white corridor in a hellish glow. A computerized voice, devoid of emotion, echoed through the halls. "Warning, particle injection malfunction. Containment field integrity compromised." Panic erupted. The students screamed and scrambled for the exit. The teachers tried vainly to restore order. Dr. Ito's face was a mask of grim concern. "Everyone, evacuate in an orderly fashion. Now!" But Izuku was frozen, his eyes locked on the particle accelerator. Through the observation window, he could see arcs of wild, untamed energy, a brilliant blue and purple, lashing out against the containment field like caged beasts. It was terrifying, but a part of him, the analytical, curious part, was utterly mesmerized. Then he saw it. One of his classmates, a small girl, had tripped and fallen. The stampeding crowd was about to trample her. Without a second thought, Izuku broke away from the fleeing group, his feet moving before his brain could protest. He scrambled over to the girl, helping her up. "Are you okay? Go!" he yelled, pushing her towards the exit. As she ran, a powerful tremor shook the entire facility. Izuku was thrown off his feet, his head smacking against the metal railing of the observation deck. His vision swam. The roar of the accelerator grew to a deafening crescendo. Outside, the sky, which had been clear moments before, was now a roiling cauldron of black and purple clouds. A freak storm had materialized directly over the facility, swirling with an unnatural energy. Inside, a catastrophic failure cascade was underway. The computerized voice announced its final, dire warning. Warning, full system meltdown imminent. Catastrophic discharge in 5, 4, 3. Izuku looked up dazed. Directly above him was a skylight, and through it, he could see the vortex of the storm. As the countdown reached its final numbers, a chain reaction occurred. The accelerator below him breached, sending a massive wave of dark matter and exotic particles surging upwards. At the exact same microsecond, the storm above unleashed its fury. A singular, impossibly thick bolt of pure yellow lightning tore through the sky. It wasn't natural. It seemed to have a destination, a purpose. It shattered the skylight, not with a crash of glass, but by vaporizing it. Time seemed to slow for Izuku. He saw the bolt descending, a roaring river of golden energy. He saw a nearby shelf of chemical compounds, used for genetic research, buckle and tip over from the tremor. Vials of brightly colored liquids, unlabeled and experimental, shattered in the air around him. The world became light and heat and pain. The lightning struck him dead center in the chest. It wasn't a simple shock. It felt like the universe was pouring itself into his body, tearing apart his atoms and rewriting them. The airborne chemicals ignited, dousing him in a baptism of fire and science. The last thing he saw before his world went black was a flash of red lightning, a fleeting, impossible image that burned itself into his mind. Then, there was only silence. 9 months. For 9 agonizing months, Inko Midoriya sat by her son's hospital bed. The world had moved on. The SDR Labs disaster was the biggest news story of the year. The explosion had released a wave of energy across Mizutafu, and strange incidents began to occur. People who were present at the lab, or even just in the path of the energy wave, began manifesting strange, unstable new powers. The media called them metahumans. They were not born with quirks, they were made. Dr. Ito, tragically paralyzed from the waist down in the explosion, had become a recluse, his grand dream shattered. But for Inko, the only thing that mattered was the still, pale boy connected to a web of tubes and monitors. The doctors were baffled. Izuku's body had been horrifically burned, but his cells were regenerating at an impossible rate. There was a strange, latent electrical energy in his system they couldn't explain. He was perfectly healthy, yet he would not wake up. He was in a coma from which there seemed no escape. Every day, she would hold his hand, her tears dampening the starched white sheets. She talked to him about her day, about the news, about his favorite heroes. She'd read from his notebooks, her voice cracking as she recited his detailed analysis of All Might's Texas smash. "Please, Izuku," she would whisper, her forehead resting against his. "Please wake up. Your mom is here." On the 274th day, SDR Labs, under the new acting leadership of the now wheelchair-bound Dr. Ito, offered to move Izuku to their private, state-of-the-art medical facility. They claimed their equipment was better suited to monitor the strange energies in his body. Desperate for any hope, Inko agreed. And then, on the 275th day, something changed. The monitor tracking his brain activity, usually a slow, steady wave, began to spike erratically. Inside the darkness of his own mind, Izuku was running. He was running from a shadow wreathed in red lightning, a terrifying figure of pure malice. He ran and ran, until a voice, calm and familiar, cut through the nightmare. "A mind like yours is exactly what science needs." His eyelids fluttered. The first thing Izuku was aware of was the color white. A white ceiling, white walls, a white blanket. The second was the rhythmic, gentle beeping of a machine next to him. It was a sound he'd grown so accustomed to hearing in the background of his mother's voice, a sound he now realized was his own heartbeat. He blinked, his eyes struggling to focus. The light was soft, not harsh. He tried to sit up, but his muscles felt like jelly. A wave of dizziness washed over him. "Easy there. Don't try to move too fast." The voice was female, calm and steady. A young woman with bright orange hair tied back in a side ponytail came into his view. She wore a lab coat and had a kind, reassuring smile. Where am I?" Izuku's voice was a dry and used rasp. You're at SDR Labs, she said, handing him a glass of water with a straw. My name is Itsuka Kendo. I'm a biochemist here. You've been in a coma for a little over 9 months, Izuku. 9 months. The words hit him like a physical blow. He'd missed the end of middle school. He'd missed everything. The explosion. The lightning. It came rushing back in a disjointed, terrifying jumble. My mom, is she okay? She's fine, Itsuka said gently. She's been notified that you're awake. She's on her way. Relief, so potent it almost made him pass out again, flooded through him. As his head cleared, he noticed something else. He felt different. Not just weak from atrophy, but fundamentally altered. There was a low, constant thrumming under his skin, a buzzing in his ears like a million tiny bees. It felt like every cell in his body was a coiled spring, humming with potential energy. The door slid open, and 2 more figures entered. One was Mei Hatsum, her pink dreadlocks and goggles just as he remembered. The other was Dr. Ito, his legs immobile in a high-tech wheelchair, his face etched with a new, weary sadness that hadn't been there before the explosion. Mr. Midoriya, Dr. Ito said, his voice softer now. It is a miracle to see you awake. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for what happened. The explosion, it was my fault. My hubris. It's okay, Izuku mumbled, still trying to process everything. You, me, and Kendo here. Mei chirped, pointing a thumb at herself. We're the only ones from the TER group who stuck around. The explosion did things. My quirk zoom got a major upgrade. I can see down to the micron level now. It's great for my babies. She patted a device on her belt. The particle wave that struck you wasn't normal, Izuku. Itsuka explained, her tone shifting to a more clinical one. Your DNA was fundamentally rewritten. The lightning strike acted as a catalyst. We've never seen anything like it. Izuka looked down at his hands. They seemed normal. He flexed his fingers. The buzzing intensified slightly. Just then, a medical droid rolled into the room carrying a tray of supplies. As it maneuvered around Mei, its wheel caught on a loose cable on the floor. The droid tilted, its balance lost. The metal tray, laden with syringes, vials, and sterile instruments, flew into the air, contents scattering in a chaotic arc directly towards Izuku's bed. And then the world stopped. It wasn't that it froze. It was more that his perception of it stretched, like taffy being pulled. The loud clang of the tray hitting the floor became a deep, resonant, impossibly long boom. The panicked gasp from Itsuka became a drawn-out, low-pitched groan. He saw every single item on the tray hanging in the air, as if suspended in clear gelatin. A syringe spun lazily, a single drop of saline clinging to its tip. A glass vial tumbled end over end, the light from the ceiling glinting off its surface in slow, deliberate flashes. Instinct, not thought, took over. His body moved with a preternatural grace he had never possessed. He was out of the bed, his bare feet silent on the linoleum floor. His hands became blurs. He plucked the spinning syringe from the air. His fingers danced, catching vial after vial, his movements precise and economical. He snatched a rolling spool of gauze just before it could unravel. In what felt to him like a leisurely minute but was in reality less than a single second, he had caught every single item. He stood there, in the middle of the room, his arms full of medical supplies, his heart hammering against his ribs not with a thump-thump, but with a sound like a hummingbird's wings. Time snapped back to its normal pace. The loud, crashing sound he had heard in slow motion finally echoed in the room. Mei, Itsuka, and Dr. Ito stared, their mouths agape. They hadn't seen his movements. To them, the tray had simply tilted, and in the blink of an eye, Izuku was standing in the middle of the room, holding everything. Slowly, dumbfounded, Izuku looked down at the items in his arms. Then he looked at his hands. They were vibrating. A faint, golden-yellow aura, like heat haze, shimmered around his fingers. Tiny, exquisite arcs of lightning, no bigger than a thumbnail, danced between his knuckles. The low thrumming under his skin was now a roaring, crackling symphony of power. He stared, his green eyes wide with a mixture of pure, unadulterated terror and a wild, impossible surge of hope. Quirkless. Useless. Deku. The words echoed in his memory, the ghost of a life that had ended 9 months ago on the floor of the SDR Lab's observation deck. He looked at the lightning dancing on his skin. A new life, it seemed, was just beginning. And it was going to be anything but ordinary. The world snapped back into focus with a jarring suddenness. The cacophony of the real world, the metallic clang of the tray finally hitting the floor, Itsuka's sharp gasp, Mei's wide-eyed, "Whoa!" crashed over Izuku. He stood in the center of the pristine white room, his bare feet cold on the linoleum, his arms laden with an impossible collection of medical supplies. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs, a rhythm far too fast for a normal human being. He looked down at his hands. The golden lightning still danced across his knuckles, a beautiful, terrifying spectacle. The low hum that had been a subtle vibration under his skin was now an audible crackle, the air around him thick with the scent of ozone. "Izuku!" Itsuka's voice was a hushed whisper, a mixture of awe and clinical concern. How did you do that?" He couldn't answer. He didn't know. His brain, the analytical engine that had meticulously catalogued hundreds of quirks, had no file for this. There was no precedent, no theory, no explanation. One moment chaos. The next perfect, impossible order orchestrated by his own body. He had moved without thinking, acted without choosing. Mei Hatsum broke the stunned silence. She wasn't scared or confused. Her eyes, magnified by her custom goggles, were gleaming with the fervent light of discovery. She whipped a scanner out of her pocket and aimed it at him. His biokinetic energy output just spiked to 4,000 kilojoules. The ambient static discharge is off the charts. This is incredible. My babies could run for a week off that kind of juice. It was Dr. Ito who brought a semblance of calm back to the room. He wheeled himself forward, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the shock of the others, nor the manic glee of Mei. It was a deep, quiet intensity, as if he was looking at a complex equation he had long theorized and was now seeing solved for the first time. "Mr. Midoriya," he said, his voice level. "Please put the equipment down on the bed and try to relax." Izuku obeyed numbly, his movements stiff. The moment the last vial was set down, the lightning around his hands flickered and died, the crackling sound fading, the intense buzzing sensation receded, returning to the low thrum beneath his skin. He felt a sudden wave of exhaustion, as if that single second of activity had drained a massive reservoir of energy he didn't even know he had. He stumbled back, and Itsuka was instantly at his side, guiding him to sit on the edge of the bed. "His heart rate is stabilizing, but it was well over 300 beats per minute," she reported, her fingers pressed against his wrist. "Vitals are all over the place." "Izuku, how do you feel?" "Tired," he breathed, the single word a profound understatement. "And buzzy," Dr. Ito nodded slowly. "I believe," he began, his voice capturing the full attention of the room, "that it is time we had a proper discussion about your condition." An hour later, Izuku sat in Dr. Ito's office. It was a stark, minimalist room, dominated by a large holographic display and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a massive, empty chamber below. He was dressed in a comfortable gray SDR Labs sweatsuit, a mug of nutrient-rich broth warming his hands. Mei and Itsuka were there, flanking Dr. Ito's wheelchair, forming a strange, impromptu council. "The particle accelerator explosion did more than just cause physical destruction," Ito explained, his fingers steepled before him. "It tore a temporary hole in our reality, flooding the city, and you, at the epicenter, with a wave of what we can only define as dark matter. This energy bonded with the DNA of certain individuals, rewriting their genetic code and granting them extraordinary abilities. Metahumans," Izuku whispered, the media's term suddenly feeling intensely personal. "So this is like a quirk?" "Yes and no," Itsuka clarified, pulling up a complex double helix model on the holographic display. "A natural quirk is an evolution, a specific gene that expresses a power. It's part of a person's biological makeup from birth. What you and the other metas have is more artificial. Your DNA was hijacked. It makes the powers unpredictable, often unstable, and intrinsically linked to the energy from the explosion. But what I have, it feels like more than that," Izuku said, looking at his hands again. "The lightning, the world's slowing down, Dr. Ito's expression grew more serious. What you have, Mr. Midoriya, is unique. The lightning strike that hit you at the exact moment of the dark matter wave, it acted as a key, unlocking a door that no one else can access. It connected you to an extra-dimensional energy source, a force that governs movement and time itself. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Izuku's. I call it the speed force. The words hung in the air, filled with a weight that felt ancient and profound. Speed force. It sounded like something from a comic book, but coming from Dr. Ito, it had the gravitas of scientific law. This force, it's what lets me move so fast. Izuku asked, his mind racing to catch up. It does more than that. Ito continued. It protects you. A normal human body moving at the speeds you are capable of would be instantly incinerated by friction with the air, or shattered by the G-forces. The speed force creates a protective aura around you. It heals you, as evidenced by your rapid recovery. It supercharges your mind, allowing you to perceive the world in slow motion so you can react. You are not just a man who can run fast, Izuku. You are a living conduit for a fundamental force of the universe. The scale of it was dizzying. For 14 years, he had been defined by a lack. A zero. Quirkless. Now, he was being told he was connected to something that sounded like the source code of reality itself. A soft chime interrupted them. A monitor on Dr. Ito's desk showed a live feed of the entrance lobby. A woman with dark green hair was speaking anxiously to the receptionist. My mom! Izuku breathed. Itsuka gave him a reassuring smile. We'll handle it. We've prepared a plausible cover story. The explosion and the lightning acted as a severe electroshock therapy, unlocking a latent speed quirk that was dormant in your system. It's a 1 in a billion medical anomaly. It's not a lie. From a certain point of view, the reunion with his mother was a storm of tears and relieved sobs. Inko Midoriya hugged her son so tightly he thought his super healing might be put to the test. She fussed over him, her eyes tracing every inch of his face, as if to reassure herself he was truly there. When Dr. Ito and Itsuka explained the latent quirk theory, she simply wept with a different kind of emotion, not just relief, but a form of retroactive joy. The dream she had been forced to crush for her son all those years ago was, impossibly, real. Watching her, Izuku felt a pang of guilt over the deception, but he understood its necessity. How could he possibly explain the speed force to her? The danger was too great. For her safety, the truth had to remain within the walls of SDR Labs. Dr. Ito made them an offer. Your abilities, Izuku, are magnificent, but they are also uncontrolled and dangerous. We have the facilities and the expertise to help you. To train you, let us help you understand what's happening to you. Let SDR Labs be your home while you learn. Looking at the hope in his mother's eyes, and feeling the volatile, alien power coursing through his own veins, Izuku knew there was only one answer he could give. The Speed Lab was the massive, empty chamber Izuku had seen from Dr. Ito's office. It was a vast, circular arena with reinforced walls and a floor made of a strange, energy-absorbent composite. In the center of the room sat its most impressive feature. I call her the Cosmic Treadmill, Mei Hatsum announced, gesturing with a grand sweep of her arm. My #1 baby! She's built with a self-regenerating, frictionless polymer surface. She can withstand speeds up to Mach 5, theoretically, and the kinetic energy you generate is siphoned off to help power the whole facility. It's the ultimate in green energy. The treadmill was a monster, far larger than any gym equipment. It was a wide, sleek platform with an array of monitors and sensors at the front. It looked like it belonged on a spaceship. Izuku stood before it, now wearing a specialized suit Itsuka had provided. It was a form-fitting, biometric garment, covered in tiny sensors to monitor his vitals in real time. All right, Izuku, Itsuka's voice said, calm and professional, from the safety of the overhead control room. The suit is monitoring your heart rate, metabolic rate, and cellular decay. Mei is monitoring your speed and energy output. Dr. Ito is overseeing. We're just going to start slow. A light jog. Just to get a baseline. Izuku nodded, his mouth dry. He stepped onto the treadmill, the surface feeling strangely smooth under his feet. Ready? Dr. Ito's voice crackled through the comms system embedded in his suit. Ready, Izuku replied, his own voice tight with nerves. Begin. He took a hesitant step, then another. The treadmill whirred to life, matching his pace. He started to jog, the way he would on any normal machine. Okay, picking up the pace, he said, pushing into a run. On the monitor in the control room, the numbers began to climb at an alarming rate. 15 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, 70 miles per hour. He's barely trying, May squealed, her fingers flying across her console. He just broke the land speed record for a cheetah. In Izuku's perception, he was just starting to get comfortable. The buzzing in his veins intensified, a joyful hum that urged him to go faster. He leaned into it, letting his legs stretch out. The world outside the treadmill began to blur. 150 miles per hour, 250 miles per hour, 400 miles per hour. His core temperature is rising, Itsuka warned, her eyes glued to her medical readouts. Caloric consumption is astronomical. He's burning energy like a blast furnace. Push him, Dr. Ito commanded, his voice steely. We need to know his limits. Down on the floor, Izuku felt a surge of exhilaration unlike anything he had ever known. This was freedom. This was power. For years, he had been a boy who could only watch. Now, he was the blur, he was the flash. He grinned, a wide, manic grin of pure joy, and pushed harder. Golden lightning began to pour from his body, arcing off his limbs and striking the treadmill, where it was harmlessly absorbed. The air crackled around him. 500 miles per hour, 600 miles per hour. Then, he made a mistake. He glanced to the side for a fraction of a second, his concentration breaking. The sudden shift in momentum and the sheer velocity were too much for his untrained body to handle. His foot slipped. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. He was launched from the treadmill like a cannonball. He slammed into the reinforced wall of the speed lab with a sickening crack that echoed through the vast chamber. He hit so hard he left a spiderweb of fractures in the composite material before crumpling to the floor in a heap. Izuku! Itsuka screamed. Alarms blared as she and a medical team sprinted from the control room. They found him groaning, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. A compound fracture. Get the traction splint! Itsuka ordered. But as she reached for his arm, something incredible happened. They all saw it. A faint, golden aura enveloped his limb. With a series of quiet, wet snaps, the bone visibly reset itself under the skin. The bruised, torn flesh began to stitch itself back together. Within 30 seconds, the arm that had been shattered was merely bruised. Izuku sat up, wincing, and rotated his shoulder. It was sore, but it was healed. He looked at his arm, then at the shocked faces around him. The exhilaration was gone, replaced by a cold, not a fear. This power, it wasn't just a tool, it was a wild, untamed thing, and he was holding on for dear life. The next few weeks were a grueling cycle of trial and error. The training montage of his dreams was, in reality, a painful and humbling process. He ran. He crashed. He healed. He ran again. He burned through dozens of pairs of specially designed running shoes, the friction literally melting them off his feet despite their advanced materials. He learned that control was more important than raw speed. He had to keep his body perfectly centered, his mind focused, his arms pumping in a precise rhythm. Any deviation resulted in another painful meeting with the wall. Between sessions, he did what he had always done, he studied. He filled a new notebook, the cover freshly labeled. Hero Analysis for the Future Volume 14, The Speed Force. Entry 1, Caloric Intake. Speed requires immense energy. Itsuka estimates I need to consume around 10,000 calories a day just to maintain my weight during training. High-protein, high-carb bars developed by May seem to be the most efficient delivery method. Note, they taste like chalk. Entry 4, Sensory Overload. At high speeds, sight and sound become a blur. Must learn to rely on the speed force itself, to feel the environment around me rather than just see it. Dr. Ito calls it a sixth sense. Feels more like trying to listen to 1,000 radio stations at once. Entry 7, Friction. Air isn't empty. Moving at super speed turns it into something like sandpaper, then concrete. The Speed Force aura mitigates most of it, but my clothing and shoes are still vulnerable. Need to discuss a more durable material with May. Entry 12, the lightning? It's not just a side effect. It's a manifestation of the energy I'm channeling. The color is consistently golden yellow. Why? Is it tied to my emotional state? More data needed. It seems to pour out when I push my limits or lose control. It's a tell. He was a student again, and the Speed Force was the most complex, dangerous, and fascinating subject he had ever encountered. He was no longer just analyzing heroes, he was analyzing himself. One rainy evening, an alert flashed across the main console in the SDR Labs command center. Izuku, Itsuka, and Mei were eating pizza. Izuku was on his second extra-large box, when Dr. Ito wheeled in, his face grim. "Trouble," he said, nodding towards the screen. A news report was playing. A severe, localized storm was raging over the Muzutafu River, threatening to burst the banks near the industrial district. But this was no natural storm. At the center of the downpour, news helicopters filmed a figure standing on top of the old shipping yard crane. Water swirled around him, rising and falling with his gestures. "Kaido tsunami," Ito said, pulling up a file. "A former dockworker, laid off 2 months ago. He was reported missing a week after the accelerator explosion. It seems he's developed hydrokinesis, and he's blaming the shipping company that fired him for his problems." On the screen, Tsunami raised his arms, and a massive wave crested over the riverbank, smashing into a warehouse. "He's going to flood the entire district," Itsuka said, her face pale. "The emergency services can't get close enough with the storm he's created." Izuku stared at the screen, at the people fleeing in panic, at the water rising. He thought of the pro-heroes, but they would be stretched thin, dealing with the chaos and evacuations across the city. This metahuman was the source. Stop him, and the storm stops. Something inside him, the same instinct that had made him run towards the sludge villain all those months ago, that had made him help the fallen girl during the explosion, flared to life. "I can stop him," Izuku said, standing up. The pizza was forgotten. "Absolutely not," Itsuka immediately countered. "You're not ready. You can barely run in a straight line without crashing. Fighting is a completely different variable." "She's right," Dr. Ito agreed, though his tone was less concerned and more calculating. "Your control is rudimentary. We have no combat data, but I'm the only one who can get there in time," Izuku argued, his voice rising with passion. "We can sit here and collect data while people get hurt, or I can go out there and try to help. Isn't that what this is for? What's the point of having this power if I don't use it to save people?" He looked from Itsuka's worried face to Dr. Ito's impassive one. It was Mei who broke the stalemate. "He's got a point," she said, pulling up a schematic on her datapad. "And if he's going, he can't go in his PJs. I've been working on a prototype. Baby 347. She ran out of the room and returned moments later holding a simple, folded garment. It was a tracksuit, but the material had a strange, almost metallic sheen. It was deep red, with yellow lines that resembled lightning bolts running down the sides. In the center of the chest was a simple, stark white circle. "It's a friction-proof polymer I developed," Mei explained proudly. "Should withstand air resistance up to Mach 2. It also has a built-in comm system and a hood with a filtered mask to obscure your identity. It's not fancy, but it'll do the job." Izuku took the suit. It felt heavier than it looked. This was real. This wasn't training. He looked at Dr. Ito, a silent plea in his eyes. Dr. Ito was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the chaos unfolding on the news screen. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Go. We will be your eyes and ears. But Izuku, be careful." 5 minutes later, a figure in a red tracksuit stood in the speed lab. The hood was up, his face obscured by the mask, only his determined green eyes visible. "Comms check," Itsuka's voice said in his ear. "I hear you," he replied, his heart hammering. "We're patched into the city's surveillance cameras. We see Tsunami. He's on the crane, just as the news showed," Mei added. "Your route is clear. Just try not to run through any buildings, okay?" "Run, Izuku," Dr. Ito's voice commanded, low and resonant. Run! Izuku took a deep breath, picturing the path in his mind. He closed his eyes, felt the familiar hum of the speed force awaken in his blood, and he ran. The sensation of running through the city was utterly unlike the treadmill. The world dissolved into a smear of color and light. Streetlights became long streaks of yellow, buildings were gray blurs. The sound was a deafening roar of wind. He focused on May's directions, on the feeling of the pavement beneath his feet, on keeping his body perfectly aligned. He was a red and gold bullet fired through the heart of Muzurifu. He covered the 3 miles to the industrial district in less than 10 seconds. He skidded to a halt on the flooded pier, the friction-proof suit thankfully holding up. The scene was worse than on television. The wind howled, and a torrential rain fell in a perfect circle around the massive crane. At the top stood Tsunami, a wild, crazed look in his eyes, his arms outstretched as he conducted his symphony of destruction. "I'm here," Izuku said into his comms, his voice breathless. He didn't wait for instructions. He saw his target, and reacted. He zipped up the side of the crane, a blur of motion defying gravity. He would get up there, knock him out, and it would be over. It was a good plan, until a 50-foot wall of water, pulled directly from the river, slammed into him. He was thrown from the crane like a ragdoll, hitting the side of a shipping container with a grunt. The Speed Force aura protected him from the worst of the impact, but the sheer force was staggering. "Direct confrontation is ineffective," Dr. Ito's voice stated calmly in his ear. "He can control water. You can't punch water." Tsunami laughed from above, a booming, distorted sound carried on the wind. "A new hero? You're fast, I'll give you that. But you can't stop a force of nature." He sent another wave crashing towards Izuku. Izuku dodged it easily, a flicker of red moving out of the way. He was fast enough to evade, but evading wasn't winning. He circled the crane, a constant blur, trying to find an opening. Every time he got close, Tsunami would use the water as a shield or a weapon. "This isn't working!" Izuku panted, the physical and mental strain starting to wear on him. "Okay, new plan! Science time!" May's excited voice cut through the noise. "He's pulling the water up, right? What if you reverse the flow? Create a counterforce. If you run in a circle around the base of the crane, fast enough, you can create a vortex. Like a giant water spout. It should disrupt his control." "A vortex? Can I even do that?" "The physics check out," she insisted. "You just have to run really, really fast." Izuku looked at the swirling water, then up at Tsunami. He had to try. He planted his feet, took a breath, and began to run. He started in a wide circle around the base of the crane. The water sloshed around his ankles, then his knees. He pushed faster, pouring on the speed. The golden lightning began to erupt from his body, illuminating the dark, stormy night. The water around him began to churn. "It's working!" Itsuka yelled in his ear. "Keep going! Faster!" He pushed himself harder than he ever had on the treadmill. The world became a dizzying circle of gray water and red lightning. He could feel the strain on his body, every muscle screaming. The water began to rise, swirling around him, climbing higher and higher, fighting against the pull from Tsunami. He was creating a waterspout. From his perch, Tsunami looked down in disbelief as his own weapon was turned against him. The water at the base of the crane was now a roaring cyclone, pulling everything towards its center. His control was broken. The rain began to lessen, the storm clouds starting to dissipate. With a final, desperate burst of speed, Izuku tightened the circle. The vortex intensified, and with a tremendous roar, it sucked Tsunami right off the crane. He landed with a splash in the churning water, disoriented and powerless. Izuku skidded to a halt, his legs feeling like jelly. He rushed in and, before Tsunami could recover, hauled him out of the water and onto the pier, unconscious. Silence. The rain stopped. The wind died down. The water began to recede. It was over. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Izuku looked at the unconscious man, then at his own trembling, lightning-wreathed hands. "You did it," Itsuka whispered, her voice filled with relief and awe. "You did it, Izuku." He leaned against the shipping container, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But underneath it all, there was another feeling. A powerful, addictive, incredible rush. He had been scared. He had been out of his depth. But he had faced a villain and won. He had saved people. A news van pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gloom. A reporter pointed a camera in his direction. Izuku knew he had to leave. Before he turned to go, he looked back at the city skyline. For the first time in his entire life, he hadn't been watching the heroes. He had been one. He vanished in a streak of red and gold, leaving the bewildered first responders and news crews to stare at the spot where their mysterious savior, a figure the media would soon dub the Muzidifa Blur, had just been standing. He ran all the way back to SDR Labs, the feeling of that victory, that purpose, burning brighter than the lightning that still flickered at his heels. The days following the incident at the docks were a blur, both literally and figuratively. For the city of Muzidifu, a new mystery was born. The story of the hydrokinetic villain, Kaido Tsunami, was eclipsed by the far more tantalizing tale of his defeat. Eyewitness accounts were frantic and contradictory. News reports were filled with grainy cell phone footage of a red streak, a flash of golden lightning, and a swirling vortex of water that defied physics. They called him the Blur, a fittingly ephemeral name for a hero who appeared and vanished in the blink of an eye. For Izuku Midoriya, life became a fractured existence, split between two increasingly demanding worlds. By day, he was just Izuku, the boy who had miraculously awakened from a coma with a powerful, if slightly generic, speed quirk. His mother, Inko, insisted on feeding him mountainous portions at every meal, attributing his ravenous appetite to his growing body and the energy demands of his newfound ability. He was registered for the upcoming Yue High School entrance exam, a dream he still clung to with a desperate, white-knuckled grip. To become a licensed hero, to stand in the light and be recognized, that was the ultimate goal. But by night, or in stolen moments between his studies, he was something else entirely. He was a secret, a weapon, a student of the Speed Force. He would slip away to SDR Labs, the gleaming white facility his second home, and he would run. He trained with a new, feverish intensity. The victory against Tsunami had been a baptism by fire, revealing not just the potential of his powers, but the gaping holes in his skill. His life became a study in contrasts, embodied by the two powerful men who were now his mentors. Each offered him a path to heroism, but their philosophies were as different as science and faith. Dr. Haruki Ito was the voice of science, of pragmatism, of relentless forward momentum. He sat in his wheelchair in the control room, a modern-day oracle presiding over Izuku's training. His guidance was precise, analytical, and always focused on a single, overriding imperative: speed. Your velocity is insufficient, Izuku, Ito would state, his voice calm and even through the calms as Izuku ran on the cosmic treadmill. The energy you generated creating the vortex was impressive, a novel application, but it was inefficient. You wasted thousands of kilojoules compensating for imperfect form. Tsunami was a low-level threat. What happens when you face someone who can think as fast as you can move? What then? Ito's training sessions were brutal. He and Mei would devise ever more complex simulations. Holographic drones would fire harmless, but startling, energy blasts that Izuku had to dodge. Obstacle courses would materialize on the treadmill, forcing him to react in a nanosecond. Every session was designed to push him faster, to break his previous records, to shave precious milliseconds off his reaction time. Speed is the key, Ito told him one afternoon, as Izuku lay panting on the floor, sweat pooling around him. The biometric suit reported that he had burned the caloric equivalent of 3 marathon runs in 15 minutes. With enough speed, you can break the laws of physics. You can be in two places at once. You can, theoretically, even run back in time. Speed is not just a tool, Izuku. It is the answer. It is the ultimate power. Everything else is secondary. He would show Izuku complex equations on the holographic display, theoretical models of tachyon particles and temporal mechanics. He spoke of the Speed Force not as a gift, but as a resource to be exploited, a mountain to be conquered. His praise was rare and always conditional, a carrot dangled just out of reach. Good, but you can be faster. An improvement, but your potential is far greater. Izuku, ever the diligent student, absorbed it all. He filled his notebook with Ito's theories, with diagrams of his own running form, with calculations on kinetic energy transfer. Dr. Ito was a genius, and Izuku craved his approval. He saw the logic in his mentor's words. If he was faster, he could save more people. If he was faster, no villain could touch him. The logic was clean, irrefutable, and cold. It was in those moments, drowning in the cold, hard data of his new existence, that he would see a news report or a billboard featuring the other mentor in his life. The one who didn't even know he existed. All Might. The symbol of peace was the voice of faith, of ideology, of an unwavering moral compass. He was a stark, vibrant splash of primary colors in a world that SDR Labs painted in monochrome whites and grays. While Dr. Ito taught Izuku how to use his legs, All Might taught him what to do with his heart. Izuku would watch his interviews with rapt attention. He'd see All Might, his massive frame radiating warmth and confidence, standing amidst the rubble of a villain attack. It is not enough to simply defeat the villains, All Might would boom, his signature smile never wavering, even as medics tended to his wounds. A hero must do more. You must save people's hearts. When they are scared, when they feel that all hope is lost, you must be the one to stand tall and smile, to reassure them that everything will be alright. For that is the true meaning of being a hero. He never spoke of speed or power levels or tactical efficiency. He spoke of courage, of sacrifice, of hope. He spoke of smiles. This duality defined Izuku's nascent heroic career. As the Blur, he became a phantom guardian of Muzurifu. He would hear a police scanner report funneled to him by May, a high-speed chase on the highway, a robbery in progress, a fire breaking out in a residential building, and he would be there. The high-speed chase ended in a blink. Izuku zipped ahead of the fleeing car, snatching the spark plugs from the engine block before the driver even knew what was happening. The car coasted to a harmless stop, its occupants finding themselves suddenly zip-tied to a lamppost. The robbery at a downtown jewelry store was over before the first alarm finished its cycle. The masked gunmen found their weapons disassembled into their component parts in a neat pile on the floor, and their bodies wrapped in so much of their own rope they looked like mummies. During the apartment fire, he became a golden whirlwind. He vibrated his body at a high frequency, a trick Dr. Ito had theorized would allow him to withstand extreme temperatures for short periods. He rushed into the burning building, a living fire extinguisher, the vortex of his passage sucking the oxygen from the flames and snuffing them out as he evacuated the residents one by one, depositing them safely on the street below. He cleared the 5-story building in 12 seconds. He operated with the cold, brutal efficiency Dr. Ito demanded. Neutralize the threat. Solve the problem. Minimize risk. Get in, get out. He was effective. He saved lives. But after each encounter, as he stood unseen on a nearby rooftop, his heart hammering in his chest, he would watch the aftermath. He saw the fear that lingered in the eyes of the people he saved. He saw the trembling hands of the car chase victims, the shell-shocked silence of the jewelry store clerks. He had saved them, yes. But had he saved their hearts? He hadn't smiled. He hadn't said a word. He was just a terrifying, inexplicable event that had counteracted another terrifying event. One evening, after stopping a mugging, he lingered too long. He had disarmed the mugger, and left him tied to a fire hydrant. The victim, a young woman, was huddled against the wall, sobbing. Izuku stood in the shadows of the alley, a silent, hooded figure. He remembered All Might's words. He took a hesitant step forward. Are you okay? He asked, his voice coming out as a strained whisper. The woman shrieked, scrambling away from him. Stay back. What are you? The fear in her eyes was not for the mugger. It was for him. He was just another monster in the dark. A different kind, perhaps, but still unknown, still terrifying. He recoiled as if struck. He had failed. He turned and vanished into the night, the woman's shriek echoing in his ears. Back at SDR Labs, he recounted the incident to the team. Emotional response is an irrelevant variable, Dr. Ito stated, not looking up from his datapad. The subject was secured. The victim was unharmed. The objective was completed. Your hesitation was a tactical error that could have exposed your identity. But she was scared of me. Izuku protested. I'm supposed to be helping. You did help, Itsuka said, her voice gentle. She's just in shock. It's a normal reaction to a traumatic event. You can't expect everyone to throw you a parade, Izuku. All Might would have known what to do, Izuku mumbled, slumping into a chair. He would have smiled. A strange expression flickered across Dr. Ito's face, so quickly Izuku almost missed it. It looked like disdain. All Might is a symbol. A very effective piece of public relations. He is a sledgehammer in a world that increasingly requires a scalpel. His methods are antiquated. You, Izuku, are the future. Precision. Speed. Efficiency. That is what will save people, not a hollow smile. The words felt wrong, blasphemous even, but Izuku couldn't articulate why. He buried his confusion in more training, pushing himself harder, running faster, trying to outrun the doubt that was nipping at his heels. Toshinori Yagi, known to the world as All Might, was not a man given to idle concerns. Every moment of his day was accounted for, a delicate balancing act between his duties as the symbol of peace and the stark, painful limitations of his wounded body. But for the past few weeks, a new variable had entered his carefully managed equation, the blur. He had reviewed every piece of footage, every police report, every wild-eyed eyewitness testimony. The power on display was staggering, speeds that defied measurement, an apparent mastery of momentum and kinetic energy that was unlike any quirk on record. The blur was a force of nature, but a reckless one. There was no finesse, no style, just overwhelming, brutal speed. He was a ghost, a rumor, and that made him dangerous. An unknown power of this magnitude, operating outside the law, was a threat, no matter how many petty crimes he stopped. All Might had to know who he was, what he wanted. He began his own investigation. He visited the scenes of the blur's interventions minutes after they occurred, hoping to find a clue. At the jewelry store, he found the disassembled guns. The precision was surgical. No tool marks. Each piece was laid out perfectly. It wasn't the work of a brute. It was the work of an analyst. At the scene of the highway chase, he spoke to the police. It was like the car just died, one officer told him. We found the spark plug sitting on the hood. He didn't just stop the car, he lobotomized it. Intelligent. Precise. Incredibly fast. All Might's concern grew. This wasn't just some hot-headed vigilante with a speed quirk. This was something different. Something new. He decided to take a more direct approach. He began to patrol the city during his limited hero time, not just responding to major threats, but actively searching, listening, waiting for the telltale crackle of ozone and the whisper of displaced air that reportedly accompanied the blur's appearances. His opportunity came on a clear, cool night. A silent alarm was tripped at the Musudafu Museum of Art. A new exhibit featuring priceless gemstones was the target. It was a classic smash and grab, but with a twist. The perpetrators were the Velocity Vipers, a trio of low-level thugs whose leader had a minor speed quirk, allowing him to move in short, quick bursts. A perfect test. If the blur was drawn to anything, it would be a challenge to his monopoly on speed. All Might arrived first, landing silently on the roof of a building across the street. He watched as the Vipers burst from the museum's main entrance, bags of jewels in hand. He was about to intervene when he felt it, a subtle shift in the air pressure, a faint smell of lightning on the wind. He was here. A streak of red lightning shot down the street. It was faster than All Might had anticipated, faster than any footage had captured. The blur moved like a living pinball, ricocheting off the two subordinate thugs, who crumpled to the ground, tied up and disarmed before they could even process what had hit them. The leader, seeing his cronies go down, activated his own quirk. He was fast, a blur to a normal human eye. But to the figure in red, he might as well have been standing still. The blur didn't even seem to exert himself. He took one step, appearing directly in front of the gang leader, and plucked the bag of jewels from his hand. He then tapped the man on the forehead. The kinetic force, though seemingly gentle, was enough to knock the man out cold. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 3 seconds. The blur stood there for a moment, the stolen bag in his hand. He was smaller than All Might had expected, with a lean, runner's build. The red suit was simple, functional, the hood and mask completely obscuring his features. Now, All Might launched himself from the rooftop, landing on the street behind the figure with a ground-shaking thud that cracked the pavement. "Hold it right there!" he boomed, his voice the very sound of authority. The red figure flinched violently, whirling around. The bag of jewels dropped from his hand, forgotten. He saw the towering form of All Might, muscles coiled, that legendary smile now a grim, determined line, and he froze. Izuku's mind went completely, utterly blank. It was like every fanboy instinct and every ounce of terror he possessed had fused into a single, paralyzing moment. All Might. All Might was here, and he was standing in front of him. In his vigilante suit. Having just engaged in illegal quirk usage. His life, he thought with a strange, detached calm, was over. "You've been causing quite a stir, Blur," All Might said, taking a deliberate step forward. "Operating as an unlicensed vigilante is a serious crime. Your power is impressive, but your methods are reckless. I'm bringing you in." Izuku's mind finally rebooted. His first instinct was pure SDR Labs training. Flee. He was faster. He could be gone before All Might could even take another step. He crouched, his muscles coiling, golden lightning beginning to crackle around his feet. "Don't," All Might said, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its power. "Don't run. I don't want to fight you. I want to talk." Izuku hesitated. Running was the logical choice. The Dr. Ito choice. But this was All Might. The man he had idolized his entire life. To run from him felt like a betrayal of everything he had ever believed in. He slowly straightened up, the lightning around him receding. He still couldn't find his voice. All Might saw the hesitation, the conflict in the young man's body language. He saw the way the figure was trembling, not with aggression, but with what looked like fear. "You're fast," All Might continued, his tone shifting from confrontational to inquisitive. "Faster than anyone I've ever seen. But you're sloppy. That takedown was efficient, but cold. You left fear in your wake. A hero is supposed to inspire hope, not trade one fear for another." The words struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow. It was the exact same doubt he'd been wrestling with, now verbalized by his greatest hero. He finally found his voice, though it came out as a choked, desperate squeak. How do you inspire hope?" All Might asked, a hint of his famous smile returning to his lips. "It's not about the power. It's about the spirit. It's about letting people know that someone is there, fighting for them. It's about a smile." This was it. The core of his conflict. The cold efficiency of Dr. Ito versus the warm, indomitable spirit of All Might. Science versus symbolism. "But, what if you're not strong enough?" Izuku asked, the question pouring out of him, raw and honest. "What if you smile, and you still lose? Isn't it better to be fast enough, strong enough to guarantee the win? To solve the problem so no one has to be scared in the first place?" It was Dr. Ito's philosophy, coming from his own mouth. All Might's smile faded. He saw something in the vigilante's posture, heard something in his voice, a profound insecurity, a desperate need for validation. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a kid, a very powerful, very confused kid. "There are no guarantees," All Might said softly. "There will always be threats you can't outpunch or outrun. There will be times when all you have left is your spirit. That's when the smile is most important. It's not for you. It's for them. It's a promise. A promise that you will not give up." Izuku stared at the symbol of peace, the hero on his posters brought to life. He heard the absolute conviction in his voice, saw the unwavering belief in his eyes. And in that moment, he realized that Dr. Ito, for all his genius, was wrong. Speed wasn't the answer. It was just a tool. The heart, the spirit, that was the hero. The sound of approaching sirens broke the spell. "You have a choice to make, son," All Might said, his gaze intense. "Continue down this path, a shadow in the night, feared and unknown. Or find a way to use that incredible gift of yours in the light, to learn what it truly means to be a hero." All Might didn't move to arrest him. He just stood there, giving him the choice. It wasn't a choice at all. I want to be a hero," Izuku whispered, the words the most honest thing he had ever said. More than anything, All Might gave him a genuine, full-wattage smile. It was like watching the sun rise. Then I hope to see you at UA. He turned and, with a single, mighty leap, was gone, leaving Izuku standing alone on the street as the police cars rounded the corner. Izuku didn't wait for them. He vibrated his molecules, a new trick he'd been practicing, turning himself invisible for a few precious seconds, and then he was gone, a trail of fading lightning marking his path. He ran through the city, but this time it wasn't a training exercise or a frantic mission. He ran with a new sense of clarity. Dr. Ito had given him power. But All Might had given him a purpose. He would get into UA. He would learn to be the kind of hero All Might was. The kind of hero who saved not just lives, but hearts. He would learn to smile. He arrived back at SDR Labs, his mind buzzing more than his body. He walked into the command center to find Dr. Ito waiting for him, his face unreadable as he watched the news report about the Blur's latest appearance, and his mysterious encounter with All Might. Your vital signs spiked during the encounter. You were compromised, Ito said, his voice flat. You should have fled immediately. He didn't try to stop me, Izuku said, pulling down his hood. He talked to me. He gave me advice. Advice? Ito scoffed softly. He filled your head with naive sentimentality. Hope and smiles don't stop bullets, Izuku. Speed does. He was right though, Izuku said, a new confidence in his voice. I have to be more than just fast. Dr. Ito turned his wheelchair to face him fully. For a moment, Izuku saw that same flicker of disdain in his eyes, but this time it was colder, sharper. Be careful, Izuku. Idealism is a luxury. In the world we live in, it is a liability. Do not let the empty platitudes of a muscle-bound fossil distract you from what is important. He gestured to the treadmill, to the monitors displaying Izuku's speed records. This is what's important. Now, get on the treadmill. Your top speed tonight was only Mach 2.3. It's not nearly fast enough. Izuku looked from the cold, gleaming treadmill to the window overlooking the city lights, where heroes like All Might were keeping watch. He was standing at a crossroads, with one mentor pushing him to be a weapon and the other inspiring him to be a hero. He knew which path he had to choose. But he also knew, with a sinking feeling, that to do it, he would have to walk both. The 10 months between Izuku's awakening and the UA entrance exam passed in a whirlwind of impossible physics and fractured identity. His life was a high-speed juggling act, a constant, precarious balance between 3 distinct versions of himself. There was Izuku Midoriya, the determined student. He pored over his schoolwork, his mind, now supercharged by the speed force, absorbing information at a prodigious rate. He filled notebooks with hero analysis, but also with calculus and literature, driven by a renewed academic vigor. He helped his mother around the apartment, his movements a little too quick, his reflexes a little too sharp, but he played it off as the lingering effects of his newly awakened quirk. He was a good son, a diligent student, a boy with a dream. This was the Izuku the world was allowed to see. Then there was the Blur, the urban legend. His nocturnal activities continued, but with a marked change in methodology. Guided by All Might's words, which had become a mantra replaying in his mind, he tried to be more than just a red streak. He started leaving notes for the police, written in a blur of motion, detailing the situations. When he saved a family from a car wreck, he took an extra 2 seconds to retrieve a little girl's dropped teddy bear and place it in her hands before vanishing. He was still a phantom, but he was trying to be a reassuring one. Dr. Ito criticized these actions as inefficient sentimentality, but Izuku held firm. This was his path. Finally, there was the Izuku of SDR Labs, the scientific prodigy and test subject. Here, he was a conduit of impossible energy, a living experiment pushed to the brink by Dr. Ito's relentless quest for speed. His top speed had climbed from a shaky Mach 2 to a controlled Mach 4. He could perceive events that lasted for a single picosecond. He could run up the sides of buildings and, for a few heart-stopping seconds, across water. He was learning to master his powers on a granular level, but the emotional cost was high. The chasm between Ito's cold pragmatism and All Might's heroic idealism was growing wider every day, and Izuku was stretched thin across it. His decision to take the UA exam became a major point of contention at the lab. It is an unnecessary risk, Dr. Ito stated flatly during one of their strategy sessions. They were gathered in the command center, the massive screen displaying a detailed schematic of the UA campus. You would be exposing yourself, your abilities, to the most sophisticated quirk analysis technology on the planet. A single blood test, a high-resolution scan, and our secret would be compromised. But it's the only way, Izuku argued, his hands gripping the back of a chair. I can't be the Blur forever. I'll always be a vigilante, a criminal. To be a real hero, a licensed hero that people can trust, I have to go through the proper channels. I have to go to UA. It's what All Might said I should do. The mention of All Might's name made Ito's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. All Might's path is not your path, Izuku. He is a relic. You are the future. Dr. Ito is right about the risk, Itsuka chimed in, her expression worried. UA's systems are no joke. If they detect the dark matter residue in your cells, or the signature of the Speed Force, it would raise questions we can't answer. It was Mei, surprisingly, who came to his defense, albeit in her own unique way. Or, she said, spinning in her chair, a pair of high-tech goggles on her forehead, it's the ultimate field test for my babies. I can whip up a biodampener that'll mask your energy signature. It'll look like a standard kinetic-type quirk, just a really, really good one. We just have to be careful about the output. Think of all the data we could collect on other quirks. The debate raged for days, but Izuku was resolute. This wasn't just about becoming a hero. It was about proving to himself that he could be one on his own terms, not just as Dr. Ito's living weapon. Finally, Ito relented, though his agreement was cold and conditional. Very well, he conceded. But you will adhere to a strict set of protocols. You will not, under any circumstances, reveal the true extent of your speed. You will operate at no more than 5% of your maximum velocity. You are to appear powerful, but not impossible. Your goal is to pass, not to break records. Am I understood? Yes, sir, Izuku said, a wave of relief washing over him. And so, the new training began. It was, paradoxically, the hardest training Izuku had ever endured, learning how to be slow. For him, moving at a normal superspeed felt like trying to run through molasses. He had to consciously hold back, to fight every Speed Force-enhanced instinct that screamed at him to solve a problem in the blink of an eye. He practiced on the treadmill, forcing himself to run at a mere 100 miles per hour, a speed that felt like a leisurely stroll. It was maddening, a test of control more demanding than any speed trial. On the morning of the exam, Izuku stood before the towering gates of UA High. He wore his middle school uniform, a brand new notebook tucked into his bag, and a small, metallic patch, Mei's biodampener, adhered to his chest beneath his shirt. He was a bundle of nerves, but underneath the anxiety was a thrum of excitement. For the first time, he was walking through the front door. He wasn't a vigilante skulking in the shadows. He was a candidate, an applicant, just like everyone else. He took a step forward, his foot caught on an uneven paving stone, and he pitched forward, his trajectory aimed directly at the unyielding concrete. Idiot! His brain screamed. You have all this power, and you're going to fail the exam because you tripped over your own feet. But before he could hit the ground, a gentle hand touched his back, and his forward momentum simply stopped. He felt a strange sensation of weightlessness. He looked over his shoulder to see a girl with a round, cheerful face and rosy cheeks, her brown hair cut in a neat bob. She was holding her hand out, the tips of her fingers glowing faintly pink. Whoa, sorry, she said with a bright smile. I used my quirk on you. It's a bad omen to fall on the big day, right? So I thought I'd catch you. She touched her fingertips together and said, release, and Izuku's feet settled gently back on the ground. I'm Achiko Uraraka, she said, her smile never wavering. Nervous? I'm super nervous. But let's do our best. Good luck. And with a little wave, she hurried on ahead. Izuku stood there, frozen, his face burning red. A girl. A nice girl had talked to him. And saved him from an embarrassing fall. His brain, which could process information in nanoseconds, was currently offline, rebooting from a catastrophic system failure. He eventually managed a weak thank you to her, retreating back before shuffling into the auditorium, his heart pounding for an entirely different reason. The written exam was a breeze. His enhanced mind tore through the questions, and he finished with enough time to double-check his answers 3 times. It was the practical exam that worried him. The candidates were gathered in a massive briefing room, the lights dimming as the pro-hero present mic appeared on a giant screen. He explained the rules with his signature, booming voice. They would be sent into a massive, simulated cityscape and would have 10 minutes to score as many points as possible by disabling robotic villains. There were 3 types: 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers. Think of it like a video game, he screamed. So go beyond. Plus ultra. As they were herded towards their designated battle centers, Izuku found himself standing next to a tall, powerfully built young man with dark blue hair and glasses, who was moving his legs in a series of precise, mechanical stretches. Izuku recognized him from the briefing, Tenya Ada, from the prestigious semi-private academy. Ida suddenly turned on him. You there? With the green hair. You were muttering incessantly during the presentation. It was distracting to the other examinees. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave. Sorry. Izuku stammered, bowing his head. I was just thinking through some strategies. He had been, of course, calculating potential robot patrol patterns and optimal routes through the cityscape based on the map they were shown. It was a habit he couldn't break. Before Ida could lecture him further, the massive gates to Battle Center B began to grind open. Go! Present Mick's voice roared from unseen speakers. What are you waiting for? There's no countdown in a real fight. While the other candidates hesitated, confused, Izuku reacted. He didn't think, he just moved. This was his element. He burst forward, a green and black blur, leaving the entire group of examinees in his dust. He was adhering to Ito's protocol, moving at only a fraction of his true speed, but even that was far faster than anyone else. He rounded the first corner and came face to face with a 2-pointer, a sleek, vaguely reptilian machine that was rolling forward on tank treads, its red optical sensor locking onto him. In Izuku's mind, the world slowed. He saw the robot raise its metallic arm, a projectile launcher extending from its wrist. He could be behind it, have it dismantled, and be a block away before the launcher even fired. That was the SDR Lab's way, but he was here to be a UE student. He had to appear to have a normal, physical quirk. He dodged to the side as the robot fired a non-lethal stun blast. He then ran straight at it. Instead of vibrating his hand through its chassis or hitting it with the force of a freight train, he did what a strong, fast hero would do. He leaped into the air, spun, and delivered a powerful kick to the robot's head, crushing its optical sensor and crumpling the metal. It sparked word and fell silent. 2 points. It felt slow, clumsy, but it looked convincing. He took off again, a blur of motion through the artificial streets. While other students were struggling to take down a single 1-pointer, Izuku was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. He moved with a speed and precision that was astonishing, but still, just barely, within the realm of believability for a high-end speed quirk. He'd incapacitate a robot with a high-speed kick, then immediately change direction to intercept another. He wasn't just fast, he was efficient. His SDR Lab's training, for all its coldness, had honed his tactical awareness to a razor's edge. He saw the whole battlefield as a single, complex equation, and he was solving for the highest score. 2-pointer on the left. 1-pointer on the right. Another 2-pointer on the rooftop taking aim. Optimal path. Disable the rooftop threat first to clear the high ground, then use the falling debris as a distraction to engage the ground-level targets. He ran up the side of the building, a flashy, but not impossible, move for a speedster, and drop-kicked the rooftop sniper. He then leaped off the building, twisting in midair to land a devastating blow on the 2-pointer below, and finished the last 1-pointer with a rapid series of punches before the first one's wreckage had even settled. 5 points, he muttered, already scanning for his next targets. Total score, 28. He could hear the other examinees behind him, their shouts of exertion and the explosions from their quirks. He saw Bakugo, a human comet propelled by his explosions, blasting robots to smithereens with wild, gleeful abandon. He saw Ida, his leg engines flaring, moving with incredible speed in straight lines, taking out robots with powerful, precise kicks. He saw Uraraka, the kind girl from the entrance, making robots float helplessly into the air with a touch. They were all amazing. They all had such mastery of their natural-born quirks. A familiar pang of insecurity hit him. Was he a fraud? He was scoring well, yes, but he was holding back an ocean of power. Was this really his own strength, or just a borrowed miracle? He shook his head, refocusing. No. It doesn't matter where it came from. It matters what I do with it. He continued his rampage, his point total climbing steadily. 35, 42, 51. He was a green blur of destruction, but a careful one. He noticed a fellow examinee about to be blindsided by a three-pointer and, with a burst of speed, appeared, disabled the robot, and vanished before the other boy could even thank him. He saw a girl whose quirk had exhausted her, about to be cornered. A gust of wind, generated by him running a tight circle, knocked the approaching robots off balance, giving her time to escape. These were the actions of a hero. These were rescue points. The thought made him smile, a genuine, unforced smile. He wasn't just racking up a score. He was helping. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A deep, grinding roar echoed through the cityscape, and a shadow fell over the entire block. Izuku looked up, and his blood ran cold. It was the zero-pointer. The gimmick. The arena trap. It was bigger than he could have possibly imagined, a single robot the size of a skyscraper, its massive form tearing through buildings as it moved. Its head, a flat block of metal with a single, glowing red eye, scanned the fleeing students below. That's the big one. I'd recommend avoiding it. President Mick's voice advised cheerfully. Everyone was running. It was the only logical thing to do. The robot was an obstacle, not an objective. Engaging it was pointless. Izuku turned to run with the rest of them. Then he heard a cry. Ow! He whipped his head around. There, lying on the ground amidst a pile of rubble, was Achiko Uraraka. Her leg was trapped under a large chunk of concrete. She had saved him from a fall this morning. Now she was trapped, and the shadow of the zero-pointer was falling directly over her. The world went silent. The fleeing students, the roaring robot, the distant voice of President Mike, it all faded away. All Izuku could see was a girl in trouble. A person who needed a hero. He thought of Dr. Ito's command, your goal is to pass, not to break records. He thought of All Might's words, a hero is supposed to inspire hope. In that moment, there was no conflict. Protocol be damned. He turned and ran towards the danger. The other students, fleeing in the opposite direction, saw a flash of green. What is that idiot doing? Someone shouted. Izuku was no longer holding back. Not completely, but he let the governor off the engine. Golden lightning, the telltale sign of the speed force that he had so carefully suppressed, began to crackle around him. The biodampener on his chest sparked, overwhelmed by the sudden surge of power. He reached Uraraka in less than a second. Are you okay? He asked, his voice steady. My leg, it's stuck. She cried, her face pale with fear as the zero-pointer loomed over them, its massive fists beginning to descend. Don't worry, Izuku said. And for the first time in a real crisis he smiled. A shaky, nervous smile, but a real one. I got this. His first instinct was to simply vibrate the concrete to dust or phase her leg out. The SDR lab solution. But that would be impossible to explain. He needed a UE solution. He needed to be a hero. He didn't just save her. He saved everyone. He became a whirlwind. In a streak of golden lightning, he zipped to every student still in the immediate vicinity of the zero-pointer. One moment they were cowering, the next they were standing a block away, deposited gently out of the danger zone, with no idea how they got there. He moved so fast he was just a whisper of wind to them. He cleared the blast radius in 3 seconds. Then, he went back for Uraraka. He braced himself, his legs crackling with power, and with a single, focused shove, he sent the massive slab of concrete pinning her leg flying. He scooped her up in his arms and deposited her with the other students he had just rescued before she could even register what had happened. Now, it was just him and the robot. The zero-pointer's massive fist was descending, ready to crush him into the pavement. He couldn't outpunch it. Not in a way that looked remotely plausible. But he didn't need to. He had science. May, he whispered, a silent prayer to his friend's genius. I hope this works. He remembered a conversation, a late-night theory session about the physics of the speed force. He ran towards the descending fist, not away from it. Just as it was about to impact, he leaped into the air and began running in a tight, impossibly fast circle right in front of him, his arms held out. He was a human centrifuge, a living engine of kinetic force. He wasn't targeting the robot. He was targeting the air. He clapped his hands together. The result was not a sound. It was a physical event. By clapping at supersonic speed, he created a focused sonic boom, a concussive blast of pressurized air that erupted outwards from his hands. It was a pure kinetic shockwave. The shockwave slammed into the zero-pointer's massive head. The robot's armor was thick enough to withstand explosions, but it wasn't designed for this kind of focused, vibrational assault. The single red optic sensor flickered, crackled, and went dark. The internal gyroscopes and processors were scrambled by the sonic blast. The massive fist froze in midair, inches from the ground. The entire colossal machine shuddered, then powered down, becoming a silent, metal statue. He hadn't destroyed it. He had disabled it. With science. He landed on the ground, his body screaming in protest. He had pushed himself too hard, too fast, without the usual warm-up. His muscles ached, and his energy reserves were dangerously low. The golden lightning sputtered and died. Time's up! President Mick's voice roared. Silence fell over the battle center. The other examinees stared, their mouths agape. They looked at the motionless zero-pointer, then at the small, green-haired boy standing beneath it, panting heavily. They hadn't seen exactly what he'd done, but they knew they had just witnessed something incredible. Katsuki Bakugo stood on a distant rooftop, amidst the wreckage of a dozen robots. He had been racking up an immense villain point score, reveling in his own power. Then he had seen it, the flicker of golden light. The impossible speed. The way that giant robot just stopped. And at the center of it all, panting like he'd just run a marathon, was the last person on Earth he had ever expected to see. Deku. Quirkless, useless, worthless Deku. The pebble on the side of the road. Bakugo's mind flashed back to a brief, blurry moment during the entrance exam briefing. He'd seen Midoriya talking to that gravity girl. He'd dismissed it. But now he saw the truth. That pathetic excuse for a quirk activation story was a lie. This power, this incredible, overwhelming power, was something else. It was a secret Deku had been hiding from him. All this time, the shock on his face curdled, hardening into something else. A familiar, hot, all-consuming emotion. Rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Izuku, meanwhile, was oblivious to his rival's gaze. He was just trying to stay upright. He had no villain points from that last act. He had abandoned his strategy to save someone. He probably failed, but as he looked at Uraraka, now being tended to by Recovery Girl, and saw the look of awe and gratitude on her face, he found he didn't care. He had acted like a hero. And for now, that was enough. A week after the entrance exam, a letter arrived. The crisp, white envelope bore the prestigious wax seal of UA High. Izuku held it in his trembling hands, the paper feeling as heavy as a lead weight. For 7 agonizing days he had replayed the exam in his mind, a high-speed loop of doubt and second-guessing. His villain point score, while respectable, was likely not in the top tier. He had abandoned the primary objective for the last, crucial minutes of the test. He had saved Uraraka, yes, and he didn't regret it, but he was painfully aware that heroic intentions didn't always translate to passing grades. His mother, Inko, hovered nervously in the doorway of his room, wringing a dish towel in her hands. Well? She prompted gently. Aren't you going to open it? Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Izuku tore the seal. A small, metallic disc fell out onto his desk, clattering softly. It flickered to life, projecting a 3-dimensional image into the air above it. The towering, skeletal form of All Might, in his civilian guise, materialized in a shimmer of light. I am here. As a projection. The familiar voice boomed, though it was thinner, less resonant in this form. Izuku and his mother both yelped in shock. All Might? Giving him his results personally? Young Midoriya. The projection of Toshinori Yagi declared, a wide smile on his face. You may have been wondering about your score. Your villain point total was a solid 60 points, an excellent score that would have secured your place in the hero course on its own. However, that is not the whole story. He gestured, and a screen appeared next to him, showing security footage from the exam. It showed Izuku, a green blur, knocking robots out of the path of a struggling examinee. It showed him generating a gust of wind to protect another. And then, the main event, his sprint towards the zero-pointer. The footage zoomed in on Ochako Uraraka, her face a mask of terror. Do you think we heroes are just fighting villains all day? All Might's voice narrated. No, our most important duty is to help those in need. And for that we have rescue points. A panel of judges awards them based on acts of true heroism. The footage showed Uraraka approaching the judges after the exam. Excuse me, her voice said, clear and determined. That boy with the green, curly hair, he saved me, and I think he saved a bunch of other people too. Please, can you give him some of my points? He deserves to be here. Izuku's eyes widened, filling with tears. She had advocated for him. You can't give your points away, young lady, All Might's voiceover continued, but your selfless request shows your own heroic spirit, young Midoriya, for your actions in saving not just one, but multiple fellow examinees from certain danger. The judges have awarded you 60 rescue points. The screen flashed a leaderboard. Izuku's name was at the very top. 120 points. Izuku Midoriya, All Might proclaimed, his projected form seeming to swell with pride. Welcome. You have made it. This is your Hero Academia. The projection winked out. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Inko burst into tears, a torrent of joy and relief that had been building for 14 long years. She hugged Izuku tightly, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. Izuku cried with her, tears of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude streaming down his face. He had done it. He was going to UA. He was really, truly, on his way to becoming a hero. The news was met with a more analytical response at SDR Labs. 120 points, Dr. Ito murmured, studying the official results on the main screen. You didn't just pass, Izuku. You shattered the previous record. This is problematic. Problematic? I got first place. Izuku exclaimed, still buzzing from the news. Precisely, Ito countered, his tone sharp. Your directive was to pass, not to draw attention. Securing the top score paints an unnecessarily large target on your back. Every teacher, every student, will be watching you. They will be analyzing your quirk, testing its limits. This level of scrutiny increases the probability of discovery exponentially. But I didn't even use my full speed. You used the lightning, Ito stated, pointing to a grainy, enhanced still from the exam footage. It showed Izuku standing before the zero-pointer, faint golden arcs of energy visible around his body. The biodampener was overloaded. That energy signature is unique to the Speed Force. It's a tell. A breadcrumb that could lead a sufficiently curious mind right back to us. You let sentiment, your desire to emulate him, he said, the name All Might left unsaid but heavily implied, override tactical procedure. The criticism stung, deflating some of Izuku's elation. He knew Ito was right on a logical level. He had been reckless. He'll be fine, Itsuka said, placing a reassuring hand on Izuku's shoulder. The energy signature was faint and lasted less than a second. In the chaos of the exam, it's unlikely anyone got a clear reading. We'll just have to upgrade May's dampener, and you'll have to be more careful with your emotional state. The lightning seems to manifest when you push your limits, or feel a strong emotion. Fine, Ito conceded, though his expression remained grim. But be warned, Izuku. UA is not just a school. It is a crucible. And your secrets are flammable. The first day at UA was both a dream come true and a waking nightmare. Walking through the halls of the legendary institution, seeing the other students in their crisp new uniforms, finding his way to the massive door of Class 1A, It was everything he had ever imagined. He found his seat, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He saw Tenya Ida, the stern boy from the exam, already seated, his posture ramrod straight. He also saw, to his horror and delight, Achiko Uraraka. She spotted him and her face lit up with a brilliant smile as she came over to his desk. Hey! You're the one who saved me. Midoriya, right? I'm Uraraka. I was so happy when I saw you got in. Your takedown of that giant robot was incredible. She gushed, her energy infectious. It was then nothing. Izuku stammered, his face turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with his green hair. You're the one who tried to give me your points. That was amazing. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar, grating voice. So you did make it in. Izuku froze. He looked up to see Katsuki Bakugo standing over his desk, his red eyes narrowed into slits of pure malice. The air crackled with a tension so thick Izuku could taste the ozone. Kaken, he managed. Don't you kaken me, you damn nerd, Bakugo growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He leaned in close, his posture radiating menace. I don't know what kind of trick you pulled in that exam, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to figure out how a quirkless, worthless Deku like you suddenly got so powerful, and then I'm going to beat you into the ground and prove to everyone that you're nothing but a cheating fraud. The threat was so venomous, so filled with personal hatred, that it silenced the entire classroom. Before Izuku could even attempt to respond, another voice cut through the tension. If you're here to make friends, then you can pack up and leave. Everyone turned to see a man lying on the floor by the teacher's desk, zipped up in a yellow sleeping bag like a giant caterpillar. He slowly unzipped himself and stood up, revealing a tired-looking man with messy black hair, bloodshot eyes, and a scarf wrapped around his neck. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, his voice a monotone drone of exhaustion. That's not going to work. My name is Shota Aizawa, and I'm your homeroom teacher. He held up a blue gym uniform. Put these on and meet me on the field. We're having a quirk assessment test. The locker room was a flurry of nervous energy. As Izuku changed, he could feel Bakugo's glare burning into his back. He carefully checked the upgraded biodampener Mei had given him. It was a sleeker, more advanced model designed to handle higher energy outputs. Baby 412, she called it. Guaranteed to suppress any pesky speed force residue up to Mach 1. Probably, her reassurances were not, in fact, reassuring. On the training field, Aizawa explained the test. They would be performing a series of standard physical fitness tests, a 50-meter dash, a grip strength test, a long jump, but they were allowed to use their quirks. This is a test of your potential and control, Aizawa said, his tired eyes scanning the students. And just to make it interesting, the student who scores last will be deemed to have no potential and will be expelled immediately. A wave of panic rippled through the class. Expelled? On the first day, Izuku's mind went into overdrive. This was a nightmare scenario. He had to score well enough to avoid expulsion, but he couldn't reveal the true nature of his powers. He had to perform at a normal quirk level, to thread the needle perfectly between impressive and impossible. The first test was the 50-meter dash. This was his element. He lined up next to Ida. On your mark. A robotic voice droned. Get set. When the starting pistol fired, Izuku moved. He pushed off, channeling just a tiny fraction of the speed force into his legs. To him, it felt like jogging through quicksand. He saw Ida's leg engines flare to life, propelling him forward with incredible speed. Izuku calibrated his own pace, ensuring he crossed the finish line just a fraction of a second behind Ida. His time, 3.05 seconds. Impressive. Superhuman. But believable for a top-tier speedster. Ida's time was 3.04. Perfect. Next was the grip strength test. This was harder. The speed force didn't grant him passive super strength. He had to use its principles. He gripped the device and for a microsecond vibrated his hand at an intense frequency, multiplying the force of his squeeze exponentially. The device's screen flashed, 540 kilograms. A powerful, but not unheard of, score for a reinforcement-type quirk. He saw a classmate with multiple arms score higher. Good. he was blending in. The long jump was easy. A running start and a controlled burst of speed sent him sailing across the entire sandpit. The standing long jump, the ball throw, for each test, he performed a complex mental calculation, applying just enough of his power to achieve a high-ranking but not record-shattering result. He was walking a tightrope, and so far, he was maintaining his balance. It was during the ball throw that he saw the full, terrifying extent of Bakugo's power and rage. The explosive boy stepped into the circle, a look of murderous intent on his face. He wound up and unleashed a massive explosion, propelling the ball into the stratosphere. Die! He screamed as he threw, the word directed not at the ball, but at Izuku. Aizawa's device beeped. 705.2 meters. Bakugo turned, a demonic grin on his face, his eyes locking onto Izuku's. It was a direct challenge. Top that, you liar! Izuku knew he could. He could vibrate the ball to reduce its air resistance to zero and throw it with enough force to send it into orbit. But that was impossible. That would expose him. He had to play the part. When his turn came, he stepped into the circle, his heart pounding. This was the test that worried him most. His quirk, as he had registered it, was super speed. A powerful throw wasn't its primary application. He had to make it look like he was using his speed to generate kinetic force. He took a breath, wound up his arm, and prepared to throw. Just as he was about to release the ball, he felt a strange sensation, like his entire body was wrapped in thick, heavy cloth. The buzzing of the speed force in his veins was gone. It was just silent. He threw the ball with all his natural, quirkless strength. It landed with a pathetic thud about 40 meters away. 46 meters, Aizawa's device read. Izuku stared at his hand, then at his teacher. What? I erased your quirk, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing a faint, menacing red, his scarf and hair floating around him as if weightless. That flashy entrance exam, it wasn't rational. A power like that, which clearly damages your body, is useless in a real fight. You'd be a liability. Izuku realized Aizawa had misinterpreted his exhaustion after the zero-pointer feat as recall from his own power. It was the perfect cover, but right now, it was a disaster. You can't be a hero if you're a one-trick pony who ends up needing to be saved after a single attack, Aizawa continued, his quirk still active. I've returned your quirk. You have one more throw. Show me you have some control, or you're done. The heavy feeling vanished. The familiar crackling hum of the speed force returned, a reassuring thrum in his blood. This was his one chance. He had to show control. He had to show power. He had to do it without revealing everything. He remembered a lesson with Dr. Ito. The energy is not just in your legs, Izuku. It is in every cell of your body. Focus it. Channel it. The tip of your finger should be able to strike with the force of a speeding car. Izuku picked up the ball. He took his stance. He didn't focus on his whole arm. He focused on a single point, the tip of his index finger. He poured a controlled, massive amount of kinetic energy from the speed force into that one, tiny spot. He threw the ball. As it left his hand, he flicked his index finger forward, releasing the stored energy in a concentrated burst. The ball didn't explode. It didn't have a flashy trail. It simply vanished. A sonic boom, a mere pop, was the only evidence of the force he had just unleashed. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly. He held up his device. A high-pitched beep echoed across the field. 705.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo. By 1/10 of a meter. It was a deliberate, calculated statement. I am not a fraud. And I am not beneath you. The rest of the class erupted in amazed murmurs. Izuku looked down at his finger. It was swollen and purple, the small bones inside likely fractured. He had miscalculated the recoil. Aizawa's assumption had been correct, just for the wrong reasons. He had shown great power, but at a cost. It was the perfect disguise. He looked over at Bakugo. The explosive teen was shaking, his hands clenched into fists, smoke beginning to seep from his palms. His face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending fury. He had been beaten. By Deku. It was impossible. It was an insult. It was a declaration of war. DKU. Bakugo screamed, blasting forward, his hands crackling. You bastard! What was that? Tell me how you're cheating. Before he could reach Izuku, he was ensnared by Aizawa's capture weapon, the scarf wrapping around him like a steel python. Stand down, Aizawa ordered, his voice dangerously low. Stop making me use my quirk. I've got dry eye. Bakugo struggled, but the weapon held him fast. Aizawa reined him in, and after a tense standoff, the explosive energy finally died down. The rest of the tests passed in a blur. Izuku was careful, his performance on the remaining events solid but not spectacular, letting his ball throw stand as his moment in the spotlight. When the final scores were tallied, he was in the upper middle of the class. He hadn't come in last. He was safe. And by the way, Aizawa said, a sly grin spreading across his face. The expulsion thing was a lie. It was a logical deception to make you push your limits. The entire class, save for a stoic few, screamed in outrage. Izuku felt a wave of relief so intense his knees almost buckled. He had survived his first day. He had navigated the minefield of his secrets, and made it through. But as he packed his bag to leave, a shadow fell over him. He looked up into the furious, crimson eyes of Katsuki Bakugo. The classroom was nearly empty, the last few students giving them a wide berth. Bakugo didn't shout this time. His voice was a low, menacing hiss, more terrifying than any explosion. We're not done, he whispered, his knuckles white where he gripped the strap of his bag. I saw it during the exam. That golden lightning shit. That's not what you used today. You're hiding something. Izuku's blood ran cold. He had seen the lightning. He had noticed. I don't know what you're talking about, Kaken, Izuku stammered, his well-rehearsed excuse feeling flimsy and transparent. My quirk it just came in late. The accelerator explosion at SDR Labs must have triggered it. Bullshit, Bakugo spat. You've been looking down on me all this time, haven't you? Following me around like a lost puppy, scribbling in your creepy notebooks, all while hiding a quirk like that. You thought I was a fool? No! It's not like that at all. Izuku protested, his voice desperate. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses, Bakugo snarled, shoving past him and bumping his shoulder hard. He paused at the door. From now on, we're not friends. We're not rivals. I'm just the guy who's going to crush you and expose you for the liar you are. Watch your back, Deku. He was gone. Izuku stood alone in the empty classroom, the weight of his secret pressing down on him. He had passed the test, but he had made a powerful enemy. Aizawa was suspicious. Bakugo knew he was lying, and this was only the first day. The double life he had been living was becoming exponentially more complicated. Being a student at UA and a vigilante for SDR Labs was a balancing act on a razor's edge. He had to maintain his cover in a class full of the most talented, observant young heroes in the country, all while being hunted by the explosive rage of his childhood friend. He looked out the window at the setting sun. His Hero Academia was just beginning, and it was already threatening to tear his world apart.